Welcome to Load the Box. We are about 2 weeks removed from the Super Bowl already, and it's NFL scouting combine time. We're already in the combine. The draft is only about a couple months away. Free agency starts in a couple of weeks. We're in the middle of the franchise tag window. There's a lot going on, even if there's nothing to watch on TV. There's a lot of things going on behind the scenes. As Jordan likes to say on this show every week, this is when Super Bowls are won. And so here at Load the Box, we are going to break everything down for you, for your favorite team, the Minnesota Vikings, in their preparation and their work to go win that elusive Super Bowl. Today, we want to talk about something really interesting that Brian Flores, the new Vikings defensive coordinator, said in his introductory press conference a couple of weeks ago. When asked about his ideal personnel for his defense, one of the many things that he said, outside of just some kind of generic statements, was some of the guys that are here, or many of the guys that are here, are, and I don't want to, this is paraphrasing. This isn't a direct quote. But many of the guys that are here are the types of guys that he would like to have on his roster. And so then he kind of talked about some things like aggressiveness and selflessness and team first, and laying your body out there, and all these kind of things that you'd like to hear a head coach say or defensive coordinator say. So we want to look specifically at that statement of the guys that are here, or many guys that are here. What does that mean? Which of the guys that are here are those fellas that Mr. Flores will roll out there in week 1 in September? So Jordan and I are going to take a look at the 2022 roster on the defensive side and see which of these fellas are coming back in our estimation and which we think will not be a part of Flores' grand scheme. How does that sound, Jordan?
It sounds amazing, and may I just say, this feels to me like stamp collecting, because it kind of, you're just picking through garbage, and you're trying to find something salvageable, because this defense was really bad, and if you want my personal opinion, I think Brian Flores saying, oh yeah, there's a ton of guys here that are my kind of guys, and blah, 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 player coach, I think that's him just kind of saying, like, hey, I want to keep everybody that was here. So that way, whenever you do see guys like Kendricks and Hicks and maybe Patrick Peterson not retained or straight up cut, Brian Flores can still talk to his defense as like, look, I know you loved Eric Kendricks, Brian Asamoah. I know you thought he was a great teammate and you wanted to play alongside him. I don't make those decisions. I said in my, press conference, I thought, so many got blah, blah, blah. I think he's kind of setting that kind of a foundation up. But I do think that there are some, like a good stamp collector, there are some salvageable pieces on this defense that could come back next year. And with a couple of additions to the defense, I think we could see it be, that top 20, top half of the league maybe type of unit that that Vikings fans are desperately clamoring for it to be.
Yeah, I mean, and we're not asking for this defense to skyrocket into the top 10 like they were, back in the height of the Zimmer era in the late 2010s. We're simply looking for a competent defense, because I think you and I both believe, Jordan, I think most Vikings fans believe that our offense can go toe-to-toe with almost any offense in the league. And especially if they bring in a competent and, sorry, KJ and Adam, competent wide receiver too. I think there's going to be, even more problems that the offense poses. So if the defense can just be serviceable, that's what we're looking for here. So I'm curious, you mentioned some of those fan favorites, those veterans, Jordan. You mentioned Jordan Hicks, Eric Kendricks, and Patrick Peterson. I think it's fair to say that, you and I both think most, if not all three of those guys probably aren't coming back. Is there any reasoning as to why, let's just say, Peterson might come back? There's at least fan speculation that he might come back. He tweeted something cryptic, but what do you think about number 7 coming back next year?
I just don't think it's a scheme fit. And I don't want to be, Mr. Negativity, because, Patrick Peterson, he had a solid enough season. It was kind of disheartening to see the Giants just attack Patrick Peterson with, basically, hey, let's see how fast those old legs are type routes in that playoff game. But I think, I don't want to say he got exposed because he's still a good player, but like you have to find the right scheme for him. And I don't think Brian Flores is going to run this 10 yards off coverage, the Donna Shell defense, if you will, that Patrick Peterson, I think, did thrive in a bit. And I don't think Patrick Peterson, to me, is a guy that I would be focusing on bringing back. I think I would definitely be looking more into the free agency market / looking, into like the Duke Shelleys, who are going to need to be re-signed if you want to keep him. And I think that he is one of the pieces that Flores is being 100% truthful about when he says there are pieces on this defense that I think can play. I think Duke Shelley could play in Brian Flores' defense right now, which is why I think he's going to stay in Minnesota. I think Kwesi will get a deal done with him to keep him as a Minnesota Viking, because I think that he is he's scrappy, he's undersized, he plays selfless, not selfish, sorry. And he has this, it's a mentality that like a first round pick can't have, of he was on Chicago, he got cut, he got put on the practice squad, he bounced around, and he landed in Minnesota. And we said, hey, we're banged up. Go out there in Buffalo, biggest game of the season so far. Go out there, and first snap of the game, he makes a play on a ball. And, obviously that's not the last play of the game, but that was one of the biggest plays of the game. So, and then he just continued to probably be our best defensive back, of the season, and he only played for like 6 or 7 weeks. So he's kind of the guy that stands out to me, and this is a very pro Duke Shelley show, I think. And I'm going to continue to be pro Duke Shelley until next season. He's the scapegoat for all of my defensive issues. But until that day comes, I'm going to keep saying we signed Duke Shelley. I want to see what he can do in kind of a puss, nasty, physical, don't let him get past you. You just nasty defense that Brian Flores is going to want to run.
Well, what's wild? Looking at the depth chart here from last year, 2022, Duke Shelley is listed as the third string cornerback on Cameron Dantzler's side of the field. So that basically means that Cameron Dantzler's side of the field. So that basically means, according to the depth chart, he's their 5th or 6th best cornerback. That puts him behind Chris Boyd, who was, essentially a great special teamer, and Chandon Sullivan. He started a lot of games just given the package that they continue to run. But that's crazy how the Vikings, 5th or 6th best cornerback ended up being the 4th best cornerback in the NFL last year by many metrics. And so I'm with you. I like the Duke Shelley re-signing idea. He has not been signed yet, but the the Patrick Peterson one is interesting, and I won't dwell on it too much because there's a lot of other guys to talk about. But the one thing that I could see as a positive for getting Patrick Peterson back is maybe 2 things. One, he just loves it here. So, I mean, he's called Minnesota his home. He's been here for 2 seasons, but he's really felt at home here. It's pretty obvious that he loves to play here. And the second thing is that, maybe Patrick Peterson doesn't have it in terms of the speed and the agility that he had maybe 5-6 years ago. But what he does have is a lot of savvy and a lot of smart. And if you're going to be playing a defense that is predicated on pressure, you're going to have smart defensive backs in in your secondary, because you're going to have guys who are ball hawkish and are able to make plays when maybe the scheme or the back end isn't protected perfectly. You rush 5 or 6, you leave only a few in the back end to take care of the wide receivers. You do need to have smart defenders who can make a play in a split second. And so having someone like Peterson, who had 5 interceptions last year, having him back there, I think could be, a decent investment depending on what the price is. So I think it's pretty clear how we both feel about Hicks and Kendricks. I mean, we both, I guess, historically probably love Kendricks, but I think it's probably time to move on. Scheme aside, I think just watching him play, it was just the slowness getting to the flat, the inability to cover, which seemed really strange considering his, one of his best strengths was as a cover linebacker. But I think we both agree it's probably time to move on from our, interior or our middle linebacking core.
Yeah.
Um, what
Which
about the
what
edge? Go ahead.
Oh man, edge is a crazy one because I think that we have two very good edges that I think Daniil Hunter put away some of the question marks about his health. Um,
Yeah.
and I'm gonna hold this against him, but like he's still an elite pass rusher. It really felt like Daniil didn't get hot until later in the season. And did he get hot late in the season because Za'Darius was attracting a little bit more attention? Um, and maybe Daniil is that ultimate top end second pass rusher that you have to have another guy who is more
Sure.
dangerous than him on the other side, because if he's the focal point of an offensive game plan, they kind of take him out of it a little bit. Or maybe it was just Ed Donatel dropping him back into coverage more than he's ever dropped back into coverage in his entire career, like ever. It just an awful idea. You take one of your best defensive pieces and you just completely misuse him. Like, let's have Harrison Smith line up at wide receiver a couple times and see if we still think he's an elite safety after that. We probably should, but it's going to tarnish how we think of him. So,
Yeah.
talking about, Za'Darius and Daniil, I think are the two, because Daniil Hunter has basically like a ham sandwich left on his contract in terms of guaranteed money. I don't know that Daniil Hunter is going to show up and play for that ham sandwich. I think he's going to want, no pun
No.
intended, it's not really a pun, but he's going to want a little bit more cheddar on that sandwich. He wants some money. And so if you want to keep him, you're going to have to pay him, which means you're going to have to pay him, you're going to have to pay Jefferson, you're going to have to pay Hawkinson, and quickly the wallet starts getting thin. On the other side, Za'Darius, I think, is a cap casualty. Unfortunately, I could see him getting traded or getting cut, just because of the age and the injuries pile up on him, and last year he banged his knee up and he wasn't the same for half the season. And in years prior in Green Bay, he had back problems and he had and it just always seems like he's got something that's nagging him and not letting him play at 100%. And
Yeah.
yeah, he still lines up, but if you're lining up and you're only 50% of the player that you should be, that's not really cutting it. We could go draft somebody that's
Yeah.
maybe going to be, maybe not what you are at your top end, but maybe he gives you more once you get injured. So I think they're two
Yeah.
very interesting pieces. I would, if this was the MLB and there wasn't a salary cap, I would say keep them both for whatever they wanted. But it gets very interesting to talk about whenever you start thinking about the cap. And now there's reports that Cousins isn't going to be getting a 1 year extension. So is Cousins even getting an extension? Is this the last year of Cousins, which means
Yeah.
he's going to have a lot of guaranteed money that's not able to be moved around on the books? It just gets very difficult to have both of them, with the money. But if I'm Brian Flores, I'm obviously banging the table saying, bring them both back. I want them coming after the pass off
Yeah.
on me. So I'm interested to hear
Yeah.
what you think. I hope I didn't cover too many bases there, but
I mean, I think in simple terms, those two guys on the field alone are the two exact kind of players that Flores wants. Like you don't need to overthink it here. He wants guys who can get to the quarterback and he wants guys who are ferocious in doing so. All right. There you go. Bring them both back. But I think you're right when it comes to the money piece of it is where it's going to get complicated. And if you're talking about the value proposition and there's only so many dollars to spread around, and guys like Patrick Jones, you know, he's not necessarily a starting caliber edge player, but he had sparks last year. He had 2 sacks in Miami. He made a decent number of plays. I remember, like, I felt like I was often writing down his name or his number when I was taking notes during the games, just because I felt like he was always in the middle of something. And so, having him as a guy who gets maybe more snaps next year, I do think if you end up losing one of, and obviously both, but if you lose especially just even one of them, Za'Darius or Daniil, I think you got to either draft one or you got to go get an edge rusher in the free agency or something, because um, what we have on the roster today isn't going to cut it for what we want to, do with this pressure based defense and this aggressive defense that Flores is talking about. So I think it's pretty cut and dry there. I think the safety position is and I should back up. It's not cut and dry when it comes to the edge. It's very complicated.
Yeah,
um,
yeah, yeah.
as Jordan said, but
I think it's cut and dry that, like, look, it's very complicated, and if you're gonna keep both of them, there's going to be some wizardry done by Rob
yeah,
Bozinski and the cap management team. But I think that it's cut and dry for us. Of like, if we can keep them both, let's do it. I mean, make it. It's in
yeah,
your hands now, mathematicians.
yeah. Yeah, we're not salary cap experts over here. We're just speculating on roster construction. We'll let the smart people actually do their job.
Absolutely.
Final thoughts here, Jordan. I think Harrison Smith is a lock to come back. I think I was a Josh Metellus doubter in the preseason. I wanted him off the roster. I was not interested. But when he got in the games this year, he actually showed flashes. And I think, if we talk about this aggressive mentality, I'd rather have him back there than Cam Bynum, personally. I think we all agree that we would like to see Smith and Seen lined up in the defensive backfield week one if Seen is healthy. But in terms of the safety room, I think it's got to be those four guys, or at least those three guys, Metellus, Seen, and Smith. And then as far as I'm concerned, I think Cam Bynum comes back because of, his contract situation, and he's pretty cheap and everything. But I guess my thought would be, I'm actually interested in two things happening. One, him being a backup, and two, him being an option in the slot. He was a cornerback in college. He didn't necessarily excel as a safety last year, but I mean, let's be honest, nobody really excelled last year. So I think just in terms of, personality, I'd like to see Seen, Smith, and Metellus see the most snaps, especially if there's any three safety looks. So that'll be my last thought. Jordan, I'll hand it over to you to talk about the safeties and close us down.
Yeah, I think that Harrison Smith is probably the poster child for there's a lot of guys on this defense that I think fit the scheme. I think Flores is just he dreams about Harrison Smith every night and the crazy things he can do. And he wakes up at 3 a.m. and he turns on the light, and his wife says, "Honey, what's wrong?" And he says, "I have an idea." And then he draws a play, on his little legal pad that he keeps next to his bed, and he sets it down and he goes back to sleep, and he dreams up more plays because it just seems like a match made in heaven. And that is why it's gonna help me to say this. I would trade Harrison Smith if I could, like, not for nothing, but if somebody wanted to give me a one for Harrison Smith, I would do it right now. And that solely lies on you drafted his replacement last season. And you kind of... So this is where we're at as fans. We have to say, was Andrew Seen... There I go again. Was Lewis Seen... I'll do it every time. Until I'm going to start a change.gov petition for him to change his name to Andrew Seen. But Lewis Seen... Is he not good enough to get snaps in year one, which is a problem? He's your first-round draft pick. Your first-round draft picks need to be able to, contribute. And I get he got injured, but, early in the season it seemed like they had no intention of playing him outside of special teams. So is he not good enough? Did you whiff on that pick? We'll talk about this, later in the week with a review of the 2022 draft class. Is he not good enough? Oh, the flip side is Harrison Smith just that good? And, you truly believe Seen is Smith's replacement. They're not going to play side by side because that's not a good scheme fit. It's one or the other, and if it's one or the other, then Smith has to go. You can't just, you drafted Seen in the first round. It would be time if you think Seen can play. So the Vikings front office, I think, is going to say publicly, and they're going to act like publicly that Scene is ready to go and he's all pro caliber and he's a great draft selection because that they have no other choice than to do that. I think that fans are going to rightfully have some speculation if Scene is not like on the field week one, as long as he's healthy, which from his Twitter account it looks like he is. So I would trade Harrison Smith if the right team came a knocking and came calling. But you have to have the right team come and ask about it, and that's all stuff Kwesi's going to be doing at the combine and during the off season. But we'll kind of see what happens. Like I said, I think he would be a great scheme fit. If he's back in purple, I expect him to have a career renaissance. I expect it to be one of his best seasons because I truly think he could rack up like 8 sacks just from the amount of times that he might blitz in Brian Flores' scheme. But that'll be.
What about
Oh, go ahead.
just quick seed planted here? How about a backfield of Scene next to Antoine Winfield Jr.? I've talked about this before. He's a former Golden Gopher. Let's trade Harrison Smith for Antoine Winfield and get all of the Vikings Gophers fans excited.
It really, if Tampa Bay is in a position where they think, you know what, we'll just not. What might work is you construct a 3-team deal where we get Winfield Jr., Smith goes to some other team, and like the Bucks get a first round pick, like something like that ends up happening. Because if the Bucks are serious about contending still, they're going to need to trade up and get a quarterback, with Tom Brady taking a gap year before he comes to call games on Fox. So I would be making calls about that because that does sound like a very exciting defensive backfield. You've got Scene doing the in the box Harrison Smith type of stuff. You've got Winfield Jr. being a true safety, just being a ball hawk, doing his thing. That would be very electric. Speaking of electricity, follow the show on Twitter at LTB Vikings for some of that electricity. Also, make sure to shop Unified Athletic. Follow my wonderful co-host at Will Badlose, the GOAT Twitter handle. Check out the Bad Loser blog and VikingsTerritory.com. And tune in tomorrow where we will be talking about the Vikings list of free agents, guys that just are unrestricted. I don't know if they're all unrestricted, but guys that will not be with the Vikings if they don't do something to bring them back. And we'll kind of weigh in on some of that. And other than that, I'll leave everybody with a skull, y'all.